They didn't send her because she was guilty. They sent her because no one would miss her. When the pack crossed Alpha Law, they stood before the council with 2 daughters, and chose the one who had never been defended. They believed the Alpha King would end her. They were wrong. They sent the wrong daughter into his territory. Rowena had learned early that silence kept you alive. As an Omega, she stayed unseen, out of the Elder's way, out of her sister's shadow, out of every conversation that mattered. So when the decree was announced, she already knew her name would be spoken. No one argued. Not her parents. Not the elders. Not even her sister. The Alpha King's territory lay beyond the border, a place Omegas entered only once. Rowena stepped forward anyway, because survival had never been something she was allowed to choose. And somewhere beyond the boundary, an Alpha King lifted his head, sensing a power that should never have been sent to him. Before we continue, let's do a quick pack check. Where are you watching from, and what time is it there? I love seeing how far the pack reaches. And don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments. Did they really send the wrong daughter? The council chamber smelled of old wood and older fear. Rowena stood at the back wall, where Omegas belonged, silent, unnoticed, breathing shallow. The elders sat in their crescent formation, faces carved from stone and spite. Her father stood before them, hands clasped behind his back in a pose that might have looked respectful if his knuckles weren't white. The Alpha King has named our transgression, Elder Marin said, her voice like frost over iron. Border violations. 3 hunting parties crossed into protected territory. The law is clear. Rowena's mother shifted beside her, a tremor running through her shoulders. Her sister Ceres stood between their parents, golden hair catching the lamplight, chin lifted just enough to show she knew she was beautiful. The law of offering, another elder continued. A bonded life, sent as restitution. The Alpha King's justice will decide the rest. Rowena had heard of the law of offering. Everyone had. It was the kind of story parents told to keep children from wandering too far, from questioning too much. Omegas sent across the border didn't return. They were swallowed by the Alpha King's territory, by him, by his laws, by whatever judgment he deemed fit. We have 2 daughters, her father said quietly. Rowena's breath caught. Beside her, her mother made a sound like something breaking. Elder Marin's gaze swept over them, past Ceres with her perfect posture and practiced grace, landing on Rowena like a sentence already written. The Omega, Marin said simply. Not a question. A declaration. Rowena felt the floor tilt beneath her, though she didn't move. She'd known, hadn't she? On some level, she'd always known. When you were the daughter no one defended, the one who learned to make herself small, invisible, forgettable, this was always where it led. Her father didn't argue. Her mother's hand flew to her mouth, but no words came. Ceres turned, eyes wide with something that might have been relief or guilt or both. She'll be prepared for travel at dawn, Elder Marin continued, already moving past the decision. The Alpha King expects swift compliance. Rowena opened her mouth. To say what, she didn't know. To protest? To beg? But survival had taught her silence, and silence rose in her throat like water, drowning whatever words might have saved her. The council dismissed them with a wave. Her father walked out first, shoulders rigid. Her mother followed, one hand still pressed to her lips. Ceres lingered, just for a heartbeat, meeting Rowena's eyes across the chamber. I'm sorry, Ceres whispered. But she left anyway. Rowena stood alone in the emptying room, the torches casting long shadows across the floor. The elders murmured among themselves, already moving on to other matters, other problems. She was simply a name on a ledger now. A debt paid. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying with it the scent of pine and distance. Somewhere beyond the border, in a territory ruled by ancient law and an alpha whose name alone made grown wolves bow, her future waited. They expected her to die there. Rowena pressed her palm against the cold stone wall and breathed. She'd survived being unwanted her entire life. She'd survive this too, even if no one else believed it. Dawn came too quickly. Rowena sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the single traveling pack laid at her feet. Rough canvas. Fraying straps. The kind of bag given to servants, not daughters sent across sacred boundaries. No one had come to her room last night. No mother with tears and apologies. No sister with guilt-heavy embraces. Just silence, stretching through the walls like a held breath. She dressed in the clothes laid out for her, plain grey wool, a cloak too thin for the mountain cold. Her fingers moved automatically, lacing boots, tying back her hair. Mechanical. If she stopped to think, to feel, she might shatter. A knock at the door. Her mother entered, eyes red-rimmed but dry now, as though she'd used up all her tears in private where they wouldn't inconvenience anyone. "Rowena," she said softly. Rowena stood, waiting. Hoping, despite everything, for something. Some word that would make this bearable. Her mother crossed the room and pressed a small cloth bundle into her hands. "Bread. Dried meat. Enough for maybe 2 days. It's not much," her mother whispered. "But it's all I could manage." All she could manage. As if sneaking scraps from the kitchen was the limit of a mother's love. "No protection rune?" Rowena heard herself ask. Her voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. In other packs, when wolves traveled into danger, they were marked. Blessed. Given charms woven by elders, symbols painted in ash and moonflower oil. Protection wasn't guaranteed, but it was offered. Her mother's face crumpled. The elders said. They said it would be wasted effort. Wasted. Because Rowena was already considered dead. They said the Alpha King doesn't care for our rituals, her mother added quickly, as if that made it better. They said it's better this way. Cleaner. Cleaner. Like Rowena was a problem being disposed of, not a daughter being sent to her probable death. "Where's father?" Rowena asked. "Meeting with the elders. Final arrangements." Her mother's hands twisted together. "He wanted to be here, but the elders matter more." Her mother flinched. "That's not fair." Rowena picked up the traveling pack, slinging it over her shoulder. The weight settled familiar and final. "You could have said no," Rowena said quietly. "When they chose me. You could have argued. Defended me. Even once." Her mother's breath hitched. "They would have taken you anyway." "Maybe. But you didn't even try." The words hung between them, sharp and irreversible. Her mother stepped forward, reaching out, but Rowena moved toward the door. If she let herself be held, she'd break. And she couldn't afford to break. Not yet. Not before she crossed the boundary. "Rowena, please. Tell Ceres I hope she enjoys the safety," Rowena said, hand on the doorframe. "It cost enough." She walked out before her mother could respond. The courtyard was empty except for 2 border guards, already mounted, waiting with a 3rd horse. No crowd to see her off. No ceremony. Just efficiency. Rowena climbed onto the horse, settling into the saddle with hands that only trembled slightly. One of the guards glanced at her, something like pity flickering across his face before he looked away. The gates opened. And Rowena rode toward the Alpha King's territory, carrying nothing but bread, silence, and the weight of being worth less than a lie. The boundary marker stood like a gravestone at the edge of the world. Ancient stone, carved with symbols Rowena couldn't read, weathered by centuries of wind and warning. Beyond it, the forest changed. The trees grew taller, older, their bark darker. The air itself felt heavier, thick with something she couldn't name. Power. Authority. Consequence. The guards stopped 10 paces from the marker. One dismounted, jaw tight, and gestured for Rowena to do the same. "This is as far as we go," he said. "You cross alone." Rowena slid from the saddle, legs unsteady after hours of riding. The horse huffed, ears pinned back, sensing what lay ahead even if she couldn't fully comprehend it. "What happens now?" she asked. The guard wouldn't meet her eyes. "You walk forward. Into his territory. Whatever comes next." He trailed off, shaking his head. "May the old gods grant you a quick end. Not mercy. Not survival. Just speed." Rowena adjusted her pack and stepped toward the boundary. The moment her foot crossed the marker, the world shifted. It wasn't loud. There was no thunder, no crack of lightning. But the forest breathed. The trees seemed to lean in, watching. The ground beneath her boots hummed with something ancient and awake. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but there was nowhere left to go. She walked deeper into the Alpha King's territory. The path was clear, almost deliberately so, as if the forest itself had made room for those who crossed. Rowena's heartbeat counted each step. 1, 2, 20, 50. She expected wolves to emerge from the shadows. Expected teeth and judgment and the swift end the guard had wished for her. Instead, she heard footsteps. Human. Measured. Deliberate. Rowena froze. 3 wolves emerged from the tree line. No, not wolves. People. Guards. But the way they moved, the way their eyes tracked her, predatory and precise. These weren't border pack soldiers playing at strength. These were born to it. The center guard, a woman with silver streaks in her dark hair and scars crossing her jaw, stopped 3 paces away. "Rowena of the border pack," she said. Not a question. Rowena's throat closed. She managed a nod. The woman's gaze swept over her, the threadbare cloak, the cheap pack, the absence of any mark or blessing. Something flickered in her expression. Not pity. Something sharper. "You're expected," the woman said. Expected. Not hunted. Not condemned. "I don't understand," Rowena whispered. "The Alpha King sensed your crossing the moment you touched his land." The woman gestured deeper into the forest. "You'll come with us. To be judged." The woman's lips pressed into a thin line. "To be seen. There's a difference." 2 guards moved to flank her, not grabbing, not threatening, but clearly not offering a choice either. Rowena fell into step between them, mind racing. This wasn't execution. This wasn't the swift justice her pack had promised. This was something else entirely. As they walked, the forest seemed to watch with 1,000 invisible eyes. Rowena felt it pressing against her skin, the sheer weight of this place, the accumulated law and power of generations. And somewhere ahead, past the trees and shadows and ancient stone, an Alpha King waited. Not to end her, but to see what her pack had sent him. And why it felt so terribly, impossibly wrong. The hall was built from stone that remembered ice ages. Rowena walked between the guards, boots echoing against floors polished smooth by centuries of footsteps. Torches burned in iron sconces, casting shadows that seemed to bow as they passed. Everything here felt deliberate, ancient, unmovable. At the far end of the hall, he waited. Alpha King Caelrian. Rowena's breath stuttered. She'd expected size. Alphas were always large, always overwhelming. But this was different. He sat in a chair carved from dark wood, perfectly still, dressed in black that made the torchlight seem pale and insufficient. His presence didn't fill the room. It was the room. Dark hair. Sharp features. Eyes like winter dawn, pale, clear, and absolutely merciless. He didn't move as she approached. Didn't speak. Just watched. The female guard stopped 10 paces from the throne and bowed, a precise, practiced motion. "The offering from the border pack, my king." Offering. Like Rowena was a thing, not a person. Caelrian's gaze hadn't left her since she entered. Rowena forced herself to stand straight, chin level, even as every instinct screamed to bow, to submit, to make herself smaller. But she'd been small her entire life. It hadn't saved her. "Your name," he said. His voice was quiet. Controlled. The kind of quiet that made you listen closer because you feared what might happen if you missed a word. "Rowena, my lord." "Rank." Her throat tightened. "Omega." Something shifted in his expression. Not quite a frown, but a subtle narrowing of his eyes, as if she'd said something that didn't align with what he sensed. He stood. The movement was fluid, unhurried, but every guard in the room tensed. Rowena's heart hammered as he descended the steps, closing the distance between them with measured strides. He stopped just beyond arm's reach. This close, the sheer weight of his authority was suffocating. Rowena could feel it pressing against her skin, testing, searching. The air between them felt charged, like the moment before lightning struck. Caelrian tilted his head slightly, studying her with an intensity that made her feel stripped bare. "They sent you as restitution," he said slowly. "For territorial violations." Yes, my lord. An Omega. Unmarked. Undefended. His voice remained level, but something underneath it had gone cold. Did your pack explain what happens to offerings sent to my territory? Rowena swallowed. They said your justice would decide. Justice. He repeated the word like it was a stone he was testing for weight. And yet you crossed anyway. I was chosen. I had no choice, he finished. His gaze intensified. You had no choice. It wasn't a question, but Rowena nodded anyway. Caelrien was silent for a long moment, still watching her with that unreadable expression. Then he did something she didn't expect. He stepped closer. Rowena's breath caught. She could feel the heat of him, the barely contained power that radiated from his skin. He leaned in, just slightly, as if listening to something she couldn't hear. His eyes widened, barely, a fraction, but enough. He stepped back abruptly, jaw tightening. Confine her to the east wing, he said, voice sharp now, directed at the guards. No one enters without my permission. The female guard bowed. Yes, my king. Rowena's mind spun. Confined. Not executed. Not judged. Confined. Caelrien turned away, but paused at the base of the steps. Something is wrong, he said quietly, almost to himself. Then he was gone, disappearing through a side door, leaving Rowena standing in the hall with guards who wouldn't meet her eyes and a certainty settling in her chest like ice. The Alpha King had sensed something. And whatever it was terrified him more than her pack ever could. The East Wing room was nothing like a cell. Stone walls, yes, but softened by tapestries woven in deep blues and silvers. A bed with actual furs. A window overlooking forests that stretched toward mountains she couldn't name. If this was confinement, it was gentler than anything she'd known in her own pack. Rowena stood at the window, watching moonlight silver the trees, trying to understand what had happened in that hall. The way the Alpha King had looked at her. Stepped closer. The moment his expression shifted from controlled assessment to something sharper. Recognition, maybe, or confusion. Something is wrong. Those words echoed in her mind. Wrong how? Wrong with her? Or wrong with what her pack had sent? A knock at the door made her turn. The female guard from earlier entered, carrying a tray. Bread, cheese, dried fruit. Simple food, but more than the scraps her mother had given her. You should eat, the guard said, setting the tray on a small table. It's been a long day. Rowena didn't move. Why am I still alive? The guard's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in her eyes. The Alpha King didn't order your death. Yet. He doesn't kill without reason. The guard paused at the door. And he sensed something in you that requires investigation. What does that mean? It means you're not what they claimed you were. The door closed with a soft click, lock turning from the outside. Rowena sank onto the edge of the bed, hands trembling. Not what they claimed. An Omega. Disposable. Worth less than the lie her pack was protecting. But the Alpha King had sensed something else. She pressed her palm against her chest, feeling her heartbeat, steady and mortal and ordinary. There was nothing special about her. Nothing hidden. She'd spent 23 years being invisible, powerless, pushed aside. Hadn't she? Caelrien stood in his private study, staring at maps he wasn't seeing. His hands gripped the edge of the desk, knuckles white. Alpha resonance didn't lie. It was the fundamental frequency of power, the signature that marked true bloodline. He'd felt it the moment she entered his territory, a pulse beneath her skin, suppressed, buried, but unmistakably there. Rowena carried alpha-level resonance. Which meant either she was the most elaborate trap ever laid, or the border pack had sent him their firstborn daughter while pretending she was nothing. My king. His second-in-command, Theron, stood in the doorway. Grey-haired, battle-scarred, loyal for 30 years. You wanted to see me. The border pack's offering, Caelrien said without turning. She's not Omega. Theron's silence was sharp. Are you certain? I felt it. Suppressed, but present. Someone bound her power at birth. Caelrien finally turned. which means someone wanted her invisible. Why send her here, then? If she's valuable. Because they don't know I can sense it. Caelrion's jaw tightened. They think they sent me an expendable daughter. They think she'll die quietly and close their debt. Theron stepped closer, voice low. What do you want to do? Caelrion was quiet for a long moment. Law demanded truth. His territory was built on it, absolute, uncompromising truth. The border pack had violated his land and then compounded it by sending him a daughter they'd deliberately hidden. Investigate, he said finally. Birth records. Lineage documentation. Everything about Rowena and her family. And the girl. Keep her confined. Protected. Caelrion's voice hardened. If the border pack realizes what I've discovered, they'll panic. And panicked wolves make dangerous mistakes. Theron bowed and left. Caelrion returned to the window, looking toward the east wing where she waited, confused and alone. The border pack had sent the wrong daughter. And soon, they would learn exactly what that mistake would cost them. The message arrived 3 days after Rowena crossed the boundary. Elder Maren read it twice, hands steady despite the ice forming in her veins. Beside her, Elder Torvald leaned over the parchment, face draining of color. She's alive, he whispered. Maren set the letter down carefully, as if it might explode. Confined to the east wing. Under the Alpha King's observation. The council chamber felt smaller suddenly. The other elders sat frozen, the weight of those words settling over them like an executioner's blade. She should be dead, Elder Kai then said, voice thin. Offerings don't survive. That's the point. The Alpha King's justice is swift. Apparently not this time. Maren stood, pacing to the window. Outside, pack members went about their day, unaware that everything was unraveling. He's keeping her. Watching her. Which means. He suspects something, Torvald finished. The silence stretched taut. How could he? Kai then demanded. The binding was done at birth. 23 years ago. Even she doesn't know what she is. Maren's jaw tightened. Alpha Kings don't survive centuries by being blind to power. If he's sensed even a trace of what we buried. Then we're finished, Torvald said flatly. The room erupted into tense murmurs. Maren raised a hand, silencing them. The records, she said. We need to ensure they're consistent. You mean alter them further, Kai then said. I mean protect them. Maren's voice sharpened. The birth registry, the lineage documents, anything that might indicate Rowena was firstborn. If the Alpha King requests them, and he will, they need to show exactly what we've claimed. Cerys as eldest. Rowena as Omega. No discrepancies. Some of the midwives remember, Torvald said quietly. Old Hela was there. She knows the truth. Maren turned slowly. Then old Hela needs to understand what's at stake. For the entire pack. The threat hung unspoken but clear. In the main house, Cerys stood outside her parents' study listening. Should have sent her, her father was saying, voice strained. Cerys is stronger, better trained. The Alpha King might have shown mercy. Mercy for what? Her mother's voice cracked. For our daughter? They both would have died, Aldrich. At least this way. This way Rowena is alive and the Alpha King is asking questions. Cerys pressed her hand against the wall, steadying herself. Alive. Rowena was alive. Relief flooded through her first, sharp and unexpected. Then came the fear. If Rowena was alive, if the Alpha King was keeping her, investigating her, then he might discover what Cerys had always secretly known but never dared speak aloud. That Rowena was born first. That the elders had lied. That everything Cerys had, her status, her protection, the pack's favor, was built on a deception she'd been too young to stop and too comfortable to question. The study door opened suddenly. Her father stood there, face drawn. Cerys, how long have you been standing there? Long enough. She met his eyes. Is it true? Is Rowena really alive? Her father's expression hardened. The situation is being handled. That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting. He moved past her down the hall, shoulders rigid with tension. Ceres looked to her mother, still seated at the desk, hands folded but trembling. "Mother," Ceres said softly, "what happens if he finds out the truth?" Her mother finally looked up, eyes red-rimmed. "Then we pray your sister has the mercy we never showed her." The words struck like a blade. Because they both knew Rowena had every reason to let them burn. The summons came at sunset. Rowena was escorted from the east wing by 4 guards, their faces unreadable. They didn't speak as they led her through corridors she hadn't seen before, deeper into the heart of the Alpha King's stronghold. They emerged into a courtyard open to the sky. A full moon hung overhead, bright enough to cast sharp shadows. In the center of the courtyard stood a circular stone platform, carved with symbols that seemed to pulse in the moonlight. Around it, Caelrion's council waited, 30 wolves in formal dress, silent and watchful. And at the platform's edge, the Alpha King himself. Rowena's steps faltered. This wasn't a private interrogation. This was a trial. "Rowena of the Border Pack," Caelrion's voice carried across the courtyard, formal and absolute. "Step forward." She obeyed, legs unsteady, climbing the 3 steps to the platform. Up close, the carvings glowed faintly, not with light, but with something older. "Power. Do you know what this is?" Caelrion asked. Rowena shook her head. "The circle of unveiling. Ancient law, predating even my line." He gestured to the stones. "It was created to reveal truth when truth is buried. Lineage. Bloodline. Power that has been hidden or denied." Her heart hammered. "I don't understand. Your pack sent you as an Omega. Unmarked. Undefended. Disposable." His pale eyes fixed on her. "But that's not what you are." Murmurs rippled through the council. Rowena's breath caught. "My lord, I am." "You are firstborn," Caelrion said, voice cutting through her protest. "And you carry alpha resonance that was suppressed at birth. Someone buried your power. Someone lied about your rank. And I intend to prove it." The courtyard went silent. Rowena felt the world tilting. Firstborn. Alpha resonance. Words that didn't make sense, couldn't make sense, because she was nothing. She'd always been nothing. "Step into the circle," Caelrion commanded. Rowena looked at the glowing symbols, then back at him. "What will it do?" "Reveal what you truly are." His expression remained controlled, but something in his voice softened, just slightly. "It won't harm you. But it will show everyone here the truth your pack tried to bury." She wanted to refuse. To run. But where would she go? Back to a pack that had sent her to die? Forward into a truth that might destroy her understanding of everything she'd ever been? Rowena stepped into the circle. The symbols flared. Light erupted from the stones, silver and gold, twining around her like living things. She gasped as warmth flooded through her chest, spreading outward, burning away something she hadn't known was there. A weight she'd carried for 23 years without recognizing it. The suppression shattered. Power unfurled inside her, not explosive, not violent, but there. Undeniable. Ancient. Alpha-born. The light reflected off her skin, her eyes, marking her in ways that made the council step back, voices rising in shock. Caelrion watched, expression unchanged, as if he'd known exactly what would happen. When the light faded, Rowena stood trembling, hands glowing faintly with residual power. "Firstborn," Caelrion announced to the council. "Alpha-blooded. Deliberately suppressed and hidden by the Border Pack elders." Theron stepped forward, holding a scroll. "My king, the records from the Border Pack arrived this morning. They claim Ceres as firstborn, Rowena as Omegaborn." "They forged them," Caelrion said flatly. "The circle doesn't lie. She was born first. Born Alpha. And they buried it." Rowena sank to her knees, not in submission, but because her legs wouldn't hold her anymore. Everything she'd believed about herself, every moment of invisibility, every instance of being overlooked, dismissed, sent away, had been built on a lie. They hadn't ignored her because she was worthless. They'd buried her because she was dangerous. And now the Alpha King knew exactly what they'd done. The council chamber felt like a tomb. Rowena sat in a chair someone had brought for her, still trembling from the circle's revelation. Her hands no longer glowed, but she could feel it now, the power humming beneath her skin, no longer buried, no longer silent. Caelrien stood at the head of the council table, Theron beside him with documents spread across the wood. The birth records from the border pack, Theron said, voice carrying through the chamber, claim Cerys was born on the winter solstice, 24 years ago. Rowena, they list as born 3 years later, marked Omega at birth. Lies, Caelrien said simply. He gestured to another scroll. I sent word to the Midwife Guild in the Northern Territories. They keep independent records, backups that packs can't easily alter. He unrolled the parchment. According to their documentation, a single birth was registered to the border pack on the winter solstice, 24 years ago. 1 daughter. Firstborn. Alpha resonance confirmed by the attending midwife. Rowena's chest tightened. 1 daughter. Her. Cerys was born 2 years later, Caelrien continued. Beta-class resonance. 2nd daughter. These are the original records, sealed and witnessed. Murmurs spread through the council. One elder, a woman with white hair and sharp eyes, leaned forward. They falsified an entire lineage. They did more than that, Caelrien's voice went cold. They suppressed a firstborn alpha to elevate a beta. They bound Rowena's power at birth, a process that requires dark magic and deliberate cruelty. Then they rewrote history to hide what they'd done. Why? Another council member asked. Why go to such lengths? Theron spoke up. Control. The border pack's elders wanted a leader they could manipulate. An alpha firstborn would have been too powerful, too independent. A beta daughter, raised as the eldest, would be more manageable. Rowena's mind spun. Every birthday where Cerys was celebrated as the heir. Every pack gathering where Rowena served while her sister was honored. Every moment she'd been told to stay quiet, stay small, stay invisible. It had all been intentional. They didn't just rob her of her rank, Caelrien said, gaze sweeping the council. They stole her life. Her identity. Her rightful place. And when their crimes threatened to be discovered, they sent her here. To me. Expecting I would end her quietly and close their debt. He turned to face Rowena fully, and for the first time since she'd arrived, something like anger flickered in his controlled expression. They sent the wrong daughter, he said, each word deliberate. They sent the one they'd buried. The one who could destroy them simply by existing. Rowena found her voice, though it came out rough. What happens now? Caelrien was silent for a moment, weighing something she couldn't see. Now, he said finally, the border pack answers for what they've done. Not just the territorial violations. Not just the false offering. But for the suppression of a firstborn alpha and the falsification of bloodline records. His jaw tightened. These are crimes against ancient law. Against the natural order itself. And me. Rowena whispered. What happens to me? Caelrien's expression softened, barely, but enough. You are firstborn alpha-blooded, he said. Deliberately hidden, but no longer. What happens to you? He paused. That will be your choice to make. For the first time in her life, Rowena heard those words directed at her. Your choice. Not her pack's. Not her parents'. Not the elders'. Hers. And somewhere beyond these walls, the border pack was about to learn exactly what their lie had cost them. The border pack received the summons at dawn. Not a request. Not an invitation. A command, sealed with the Alpha King's mark, requiring the presence of the elders, the pack leaders, and both daughters before his court. They arrived 3 days later, a procession of 20 wolves crossing the boundary with visible dread. Rowena watched from a window in the east wing as they entered the courtyard. Her father, shoulders stiff. Her mother, eyes downcast. Cerys, pale and trembling. And the elders, moving with the false confidence of those who still believed they could talk their way out of consequences. It's time, Theron said from the doorway. Rowena turned. She wore clothes provided by Caelrion's household, deep grey silk, simple but finely made. Not armor. Not a crown. Just respect. The kind of clothing given to someone who mattered. She followed Theron to the great hall. The council had assembled in full formal array. Every seat filled, every face turned toward the center where Caelrion sat, perfectly still, absolutely in control. The border pack stood in the petitioner's space, isolated and exposed. Rowena entered from the side. Her mother's gasp was audible. Her father's face went white. Cerys's eyes widened, filling with something that might have been relief or guilt or both. The elders saw her and knew immediately that they'd lost. Caelrion didn't rise. Didn't shout. He simply began. The border pack stands accused of crimes against ancient law. His voice filled the hall, quiet and absolute. Falsification of lineage records. Suppression of a firstborn alpha. And sending said alpha as a false offering, expecting her death to seal their deception. Elder Marin stepped forward. My king, there has been a misunderstanding. There has been no misunderstanding. Caelrion's gaze could have cut stone. I invoked the circle of unveiling. The truth has been witnessed by my entire council. Your lies are documented. He gestured to the scrolls laid before him. Independent midwife records confirm Rowena was born first, with alpha resonance. You suppressed that power. You rewrote history. You raised the second daughter as heir while treating the firstborn as disposable. The silence was suffocating. You have no defense, Caelrion continued. No justification. You committed these crimes for power. For control. And when your violation of my territory threatened exposure, you sent her here. Not as restitution. As burial. Rowena's father finally found his voice. We were trying to protect the pack. You were protecting yourselves. Caelrion's words landed like an execution. And you failed. He stood then, descending the steps with measured precision. The entire hall seemed to hold its breath as he walked past the border pack delegation and stopped before Rowena. Rowena, firstborn of the border pack, he said, voice formal but not cold. Alpha-blooded. Deliberately hidden. Unjustly treated. He paused. I recognize you as what you were always meant to be. Not Omega. Not disposable. But rightful. The word hung in the air, rightful. Not a gift. Not mercy. Recognition of what had always been true. Caelrion turned back to the border pack. Your elders will be stripped of authority. Your pack's autonomy will be suspended pending investigation into who participated in this conspiracy. And Rowena. He looked at her, something almost like a question in his pale eyes. Rowena will decide what becomes of those who wronged her. Her mother made a choked sound. Her father's face crumbled. But Caelrion wasn't finished. As for you, he said, gaze settling on Rowena with an intensity that made her breath catch. You will remain here. Under my protection. Not as prisoner. Not as obligation. His voice lowered, meant for her alone but carrying through the silent hall. But as someone I choose to stand beside. Chosen. Not claimed. Not commanded. Chosen. Rowena met his eyes and saw the truth there. This wasn't impulse or pity. This was deliberate. Considered. An alpha king who never acted without certainty, choosing her. Yes, she whispered. The hall erupted in murmurs, but Caelrion didn't move, didn't look away. He'd reordered her entire world with 5 words. Someone I choose to stand beside. And everyone in that hall knew exactly what it meant. The border pack's judgment was delivered at sunset. The elders were stripped of their titles, their names struck from the council records. They would live, but powerless, watched, their every move scrutinized by wolves loyal to ancient law. Elder Marin, who had chosen Rowena so casually, left the hall with her head bowed, decades of authority erased in a single afternoon. The pack itself would remain under Caelrion's oversight until new leadership could be established. Leadership that understood the cost of deception. Rowena's parents were spared formal punishment. Caelrion had looked to her for guidance, and she'd given it with a voice steadier than she'd expected. Let them live with what they've done, she'd said quietly. That's punishment enough. Her mother had wept. Her father hadn't been able to meet her eyes. Now, 3 weeks later, Rowena stood on a balcony overlooking the Alpha King's territory, watching the forest stretch toward mountains touched by early snow. You're thinking too loud. She turned to find Caelrien beside her, a rare almost smile touching his lips. I'm still getting used to it, Rowena admitted. Being this. Yourself. Seen. He was quiet for a moment, then moved to stand beside her at the railing. Close enough that she could feel the warmth of him, the steady presence that had become familiar over these past weeks. Your sister requested an audience, he said. Rowena tensed. And I told her the decision was yours. Of course he had. Everything now was her choice, who she saw, who she forgave, how she moved forward. Send her in, Rowena said. Cerys entered the private receiving room with none of her former grace. She looked smaller somehow, worn by guilt and fear and the weight of losing everything she'd thought was hers by right. Rowena, she said, voice barely above a whisper. Cerys. They stood in silence, two sisters who'd lived as strangers, separated by a lie neither had chosen but only one had suffered. I didn't know, Cerys said finally. Not at first. Not until I was older, and by then. She swallowed. By then I was too much of a coward to speak. You knew, Rowena said quietly. And you said nothing. I know. Tears slipped down Cerys's face. I know, and I'm sorry, and I know that's not enough. It will never be enough. Rowena studied her sister, this woman who had been given everything while Rowena was given nothing. She waited for rage to come, for the desire for revenge. Instead, she just felt tired. You're not responsible for what the elders did, Rowena said. But you're responsible for your silence. For every time you let them diminish me and said nothing. Cerys nodded, accepting the judgment. I'm not going to punish you, Rowena continued. You'll live. You'll be provided for. But you're not heir anymore, Cerys. You never were. I know. Cerys's voice broke. What will happen to me? That's your choice to make now. Rowena moved toward the door. Just like I finally have mine. That night, Rowena stood beside Caelrien in the great hall as he addressed the assembled packs from across the territories. Representatives from a dozen regions, all come to witness the Alpha King's declaration. This is Rowena, Caelrien said, voice carrying across the hall. Firstborn Alpha. Rightful blood. And one I have chosen to stand beside me in the governance of these lands. No gasps this time. Word had spread. Everyone knew the story, the daughter buried, the truth revealed, the pack that had tried to hide her. Caelrien turned to her, holding out his hand. Not above her. Not below her. Beside. Rowena took it. The whole bowed, not to an Alpha King alone, but to both of them. Recognition. Respect. The natural order finally, properly aligned. Later, when the hall emptied and they stood alone in the quiet, Caelrien spoke. Do you regret it? He asked. Staying here. Choosing this. Rowena thought of her old room in the border packhouse. The years of silence and invisibility. The life she'd lived as someone else's mistake. Then she thought of this, standing beside an Alpha King who saw her, truly saw her, and chose her anyway. Not because he had to. Because he wanted to. No, she said. They sent the wrong daughter. But somehow. She met his pale eyes. I ended up exactly where I belong. Caelrien's rare smile appeared, genuine and unguarded. Yes, he said quietly. You did. And somewhere beyond the boundaries, in a pack stripped of its lies, the wolves who had buried her learned to live with the truth. Some mistakes can't be undone. Some daughters refuse to stay buried. And some justice arrives quietly, then changes everything. If this story stayed with you, subscribe for more werewolf tales of sacrifice, rejected mates, and second chances. Please like and share this story with someone who loves slow-burn fantasy romance. Before you go, let me know below, where are you watching from, and what time is it there right now? This pack truly spans the world.